One of my favorite things about living the way I do is that everything kind of exists as a massive, never-ending art project. Whatever project I take on, whatever new thing I decide to build, it all becomes permanent fixtures of the land, and the longer I'm here, the more everything grows. I don't know when I'll be able to do my next big build, but until then, there's a lot I can do about the look and feel of this place through little improvements and additions. So today, I'm going to get started on completely revamping the path to the cabin. To start, I went out to a river some 15 miles down the road, where a neighbor of mine said there was a public gravel pit that he uses for all his projects. I want to completely cover the path with at least an inch or two of gravel, and since I'll need it for other projects down the road, this pile is definitely a good resource to have. I did end up learning a lot about how heavy gravel actually is though, and on every visit afterwards I left the box in the car and just poured buckets in one by one. Before I could get started on the long, slow process, I had some prep work to do. I thought for a while I wanted to turn the path into a sort of stone road, but I ended up abandoning the idea. Collecting enough stones, digging up the ground, laying them, and packing them to the point where they wouldn't wiggle would have taken the better part of the summer if I was working on it on and off. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it would have been worth the effort and would have looked amazing, but I don't think that kind of Herculean effort is the best use of my time, so gravel it is. Once I got a good area of gravel poured, I got to work on a border of larger stones to frame up the path and give it a bit of structure. To carry as many as I could as quickly as possible, I took the marsupial approach and made a kind of shirt pouch thing. Maybe not the most flattering way to carry a bunch of rocks, but works well enough if you have a shirt you don't care about getting stretched. Progress was slower than I would have liked. I know it doesn't look like it because I didn't film any of it, but it wouldn't stop raining for most of the week, cutting my working time down by quite a bit. But around Friday, I was in the home stretch. I tried to avoid digging as much as I could. The ground is so rooted and matted that it's more trouble than it's worth most of the time, but this hump in the middle of the trail has always kind of bothered me, and I figured if I was going through all this trouble to make it look nice, I should at least make an effort to keep everything somewhat flat. To cover the entire path, I ended up having to make about 7 trips to the gravel pile, but after all that work, it was finally just about done. But I realized about then I didn't have nearly enough footage for a full video, so it was looking like I needed to do another project to fill out this video a bit more. So by popular demand, I finally decided to knock out a set of steps up to the front door. To do this, I wanted to keep the construction as simple as possible, so the whole thing is made of 8 2x2x8s, plus some legs from a leftover 4x4 I had from the desk. The process went about as smooth as I could have hoped, but I did end up cutting my top boards a good bit too short. But that's fine. All I needed to do was cut an extra board for either side and I was back in business. Getting to lock everything in place was really satisfying, since I finally had a nice solid surface that I could nail down instead of using screws. There's a good reason I almost never use them for builds. If you're making something where you're going to be able to see the screws, they have to be more precisely placed than if you were framing a building or something like that, and that means pre-drilling a lot of holes. Nails are just less hassle. For my next project, I really wanted to do something with the area at the end of the driveway. For the last year or so, it's been kind of a messy, underutilized space in desperate need of some cosmetic improvement. So that's what I want to do. I have a ton of big rocks left over from the stone path that never was, and though I do plan to reuse most of that for an upgrade to the fire pit, I can spare enough to make a nice little flower bed and give this area a nice pop of color. Luckily, since the other thing that needs to go in this area is the outhouse, I can kill two birds with one stone by taking out the dirt from the hole and using it to fill the garden. But the soil quality is something I'm worried about. Almost everything I've gotten from the hole is gravel and clay instead of nice fertile dirt you might find down in the lower 48. Luckily for me, I have a good way to supplement this and really beef up my dirt for growing. Up against the bison fence is a bunch of manure piles that my neighbors probably dumped there years ago, so I just loaded up the tote with as much as I thought I would need, and got to mixing. To fill out the bed, I went looking for as many wildflowers as I could find, as my original plan for this bed was to carefully dig around the roots of lupines, irises, Jacob's ladders, and whatever other wildflowers I wanted to add, and replant them in my bed. Unfortunately, almost all the plants I wanted to put in the bed had much deeper roots than I imagined, and it was extremely difficult to get them out of the ground without doing some pretty significant damage to the root system. I think replanting wildflowers is a viable option, but I don't think any of the bigger plants are going to work, so for now I'm going to stick to smaller things that are easier to uproot. If they do well, great, and if they don't, I can always get some ready to plant pods and call it a day.
Little weasels hanging out.
We got a score this morning. Probably can't see it very well through my awful windshield, but we got a road barrel. Yeah, it's only a little dented, but I'm probably going to use this under the outhouse anyway. Oh, that's awesome. Good score.
That is a good start to a day.
Good. Barely fits.
The barrel really couldn't have come at a better time. The last thing I wanted to get done in this video was finally, after some 6 or 7 months, move the outhouse to the end of the driveway so it can finally be usable. Like the other projects out front, I was going to need to do some clearing first though, so I got my flat rocks piled up and ready to go for whenever I want to use them, and raked out the area around the hole. Now, I know it seems like the barrel should be deeper in the ground, but the height does actually serve a pretty important purpose. Around here we get quite a bit of flooding in the spring, and especially in the spot where the outhouse is going. Having the barrel as high up as it is gives it some reliable flood walls to keep the water out, though I really should have dug it in later. I'll talk more about that in a bit. After cleaning up the outhouse a bit, I was finally ready to start moving. And let me tell you, there's a really good reason it hasn't moved in nearly half a year. That's because it is absurdly heavy. My guess is 600 pounds or more, so it's almost impossible to move with one person. But after a bit of trial and error, I came up with a method that could slowly but surely get it where I needed it to go. It took me a few days to move it from one end of the driveway to the other, but eventually I did get it there. And that's when I ran into one of the last problems that I made for myself. If I just left the barrel out, I could have just rolled the outhouse over the hole and put the barrel in through the outhouse itself since the seat isn't drilled into place. But since I packed it in with all that dirt, and somehow lost my shovel somewhere in this video, it wasn't budging. I'm all for some good old-fashioned Egyptian manpower, but to get this outhouse over the barrel, I'm gonna need at least one extra set of hands. But that's fine. I'm no stranger to unfinished projects, just more stuff to do in the next video, and overall, I'm really happy with the amount I was able to get done. I'm well on my way to having everything graveled, I have a planter bed ready for when I get some plants, and all that's left to do for the steps is to actually just build them. I would have done that for this video, but I accidentally destroyed one of the main pieces, and now I need to get more lumber. But that's gonna just about do it for today. I got a lot done, and everything I missed will get done in videos coming soon. My name is Mick. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay warm out there. Have a good day.